In this picture that we're showing you now, there is a plant, a maize plant, growing in a healthy soil. It's got sunlight shining down on it, and just as I've already explained in the last session, the energy from the sun is combined with water and carbon dioxide, and it makes sugars in the plant. This is the energy that becomes food for us. And this is a very, very efficient process. There is nothing other than green plants in the world that can do this, that can make food for us. Green plants are the food making factories on this planet. Everything else that lives has to depend on those green plants for the food that they make. Now, these very efficient plants use 40% of the energy that they make for growing above the ground and for the crop, the grains that we would eat. 40% is above the ground. 60% of the energy goes below the ground. But only 30% of that energy is actually used in the roots themselves, and the other 30% is actually exuded from the roots into what is called the rhizosphere of the root zone. It's actually injected out of the plant into the soil. Does that not sound very wasteful to you? You've got this very, very efficient system, and only 40% of that is for above the ground, and quite a small percentage of that is for the grain that is produced. 60% of the energy goes below the ground, 30% for roots, and another 30% is just wasted into the soil. Is it a waste? What actually happens to that energy or that food that is put into the soil? This is an incredibly important question, and we're going to come back to it in a very short while, but think about that. If we talk about the nutrients in our soil, we talk about nitrogen. Nitrogen is what causes vegetative growth in our plants. And an interesting fact that most of you probably do not know is 95% of all the nitrogen that is used by a plant to grow is taken from the air. You know that air is 71% nitrogen. So most of the nitrogen that is used to make a plant grow is taken from the air, not from fertilizers in the soil. So this is another very good reason why our plants have to have healthy soil to grow in, because the nitrogen is actually taken up by the roots of the plants, not by the leaves. The leaves take in carbon dioxide and oxygen, and that's what they deal with, but the nitrogen is actually taken in by the roots, and in many cases in the form of aerobic nitrogen. Manure is a very good source of nitrogen, and the smaller the animal, generally the more concentrated the nitrogen in the manure. And the next element that is very important to our plants is phosphorus, or P. And a lot of people believe that phosphorus is actually short in our soils. A lot of agronomists will tell you that you've got no phosphorus in your soils, and actually I read an article recently where they said phosphates are becoming short in the world. In reality, our soils are full of phosphates, and if we have the right biology in our soil, those microbes are able to release the phosphates into our soils and supply them to our plants. So phosphate is there, but in many cases it's in a form that is not available to plants. Biology or microbes in the soil can make that phosphate available. Potassium is the third important element that we know about, so that's N, P, and K. So the K is the potassium, Potassium is important in our plants for fruiting plants, so things that have fruits, tomatoes, that type of thing. And any fruit is, if it is short of potassium, it's not going to taste as good. So potassium is important in the flavor of our plants. Potassium is also very important in the process of opening and closing the stomata on the leaves, and this has got to do with your wilting process. In a plant that is short of potassium, that plant will wilt very quickly and be short of water, because what's happening is the air passages on the leaves aren't able to close quickly, and that means that the water escapes out of the leaf and the plant wilts. If there's enough potassium, the plant's able to close those holes very quickly and conserve the water inside of its leaves. So potassium is very important from that aspect. Now, all of these elements, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, their uptake and their importance to the health of your plant is affected by a lot of factors in our soil. These things on this list are soil pH, soil compaction, inadequate soil aeration, soil moisture, soil temperature, soil organic matter, crop residues, and plant root systems. All of these things affect the uptake of N, P, and K for our plants. So, how do we fix this? It's what compost does best, and if we're using compost in our soil, it is what is going to help heal our soils. So if we go back to that question, what happens to that 30% of nutrients that get injected into the soil by the roots of the plants? In reality, they are feeding all the different types of life in the soil. The microbes, the bacteria, the nematodes, the fungi, the mites, the earthworms, etc., etc. There's a lot of different life in the soil. And those ecosystems in the soil all feed each other. And there's a food web that where nutrients are cycled around and around. Some gets decomposed, some gets eaten by bacteria, some by fungi, etc., etc. And those things eat other things, and eventually the cycle just keeps going around. Now, all of these factors that affect the uptake of N, P, and K to our plants can be fixed by adding compost to our soils. So, if we look at soil organic matter, obviously compost has a lot of organic matter in it. We've already discussed soil pH earlier, and we know that compost will heal the soil of its pH problems. We know that soil compaction is no longer a problem if we stop disturbing our soil, and that creates better soil aeration. The soil moisture, because of the spaces, the more spaces in the soil that are now available, there's more soil moisture. The soil temperature is reduced because of the mulch cover that we have on top, and we have got healthy root and plant systems that are able to take oxygen, nitrogen, and all the other nutrients that they want, and our plants are able to thrive and be healthy. So, please look after your soils. Treat them with respect. They are a gift from God. And remember that if they are damaged because of what you have already been doing, God has put mechanisms in place for us to heal and restore our soils and bring them back to the glory where they can be productive, and we will be blessed bountifully by God's rich rewards that are hidden in those dark secret places in our soil. God bless you. All the best for the conference. Love from Zimbabwe.